Harry also told the paper he wants to spend more time in the UK and that the focus over the next year, quote, really has to be on my dad. Joining us now, the Daily Mail's Robert Hardman, author of Charles III, New King, New Court, The Inside Story, and a new interview. Robert, putting aside your professional jealousy, presumably...
Yeah, well done, The Guardian.
Yeah, exactly. Congratulations to The Guardian. But what do you make of the fact that days after Prince Harry goes to see his dad, he talks about why he talks about his family?
Yeah, the messaging was that after his trip to Clarence House to see his father last week, you know, this was some sort of a new chapter. We were turning a page. And within a week, we seem to have gone back to an old chapter, which is a sort of combination of Harry promoting a very good cause. He was out in Ukraine promoting his work with Invictus, and it does amazing stuff. But then goes off on one, you know, starts saying, oh, my book was fine. It was not about, it wasn't airing any dirty laundry. It was all about truth. And you think back to it and think, well, he said it's very important for accountability and, you know, setting the record straight. And you think, well, no, it was a very divisive. It was an extraordinary book, but I mean, it set back family relations by years. And,
I think if you wanted a definition of airing family dirty laundry in public, Spare's it.
Well, it was a mega bestseller, and it wasn't because people were after truth and reconciliation. They wanted stories about you know, the airing of his breakup of his relationship with Prince William. I mean, that was the sort of headline takeaway from that book, and it was very, very painful for the whole family. And I think there's still a lot of fence mending to be done. And I think after last week, there he was in London, and there was a sort of sense that he's met the king, and you know nothing's leaked out, and maybe this marks the beginning of a new beginning. I mean, no one was talking about a sort of full rapprochement, and then suddenly here we have in the middle of the night on a train in Ukraine, sort of musings and sort of chin scratching, and
well, he's justifying, isn't he? That's what he's gone into, sort of justification mode for what he said in Spare, and as a result has doubled down on it. He says, and he insists, I was not airing dirty laundry. He says, I know that speaking out annoys some people and it goes against the narrative. The book, it was a series of corrections to stories already out there. One point of view had been put out, it needed to be corrected. I don't believe I aired my dirty laundry in public. It was a difficult message, but I did it in the best way possible. My conscience is clear. And he says that his legal battle's not about revenge, about accountability, doesn't want to prolong divisions with his family. But in life, you cannot have reconciliation before you have truth. Part of the problem, of course, is that Prince Harry's truth is different from Prince William's truth.
Well, and various other truths. I mean, it goes back to the famous Oprah Winfrey interview where it was all about, you know, your truth. And in the course of that one interview, Harry and Meghan managed to contradict each other as some fairly basic points. The sort of central allegation of that interview was an allegation of racism within the family, except Meghan was saying it was when she was pregnant, Harry was saying it was just after they'd met. So, I mean, you know, they can't even get those sort of elemental facts correct.
And as the Queen said, the late Queen, recollections may vary.
Yes.
And Prince Harry's recollection of what he wrote in Spare seems to vary from what royal reporters read.
There was some amazing, there was very touching bits in Spare. I mean, it was an extraordinary read, but I mean, the idea that it was there as a series of corrections, I mean, it was putting a whole load of new stuff out there, it wasn't correcting anything. And I think for the family, I think particularly for Prince William, the pain with Spare wasn't what was revealed. It was the fact that things were being revealed at all. These are childhood, very intimate moments between two brothers who were incredibly close, went through terribly difficult times together, and the sense that someone could just chuck all that out in the open in the name of getting it off his chest. I mean, and then justifying it with this sort of psychiatrist couch word salad. I mean, it's not going to convince many people.
Given that he said what he said to The Guardian, as you say, Susanna, he's doubling down on Spare. He's denying absolutely that there was anything of a betrayal of it. Do you think William will ever speak to him again?
Well, I don't think an interview like that's made any progress towards some sort of rapprochement. I mean, I think it would seem to be a long way off. But I mean, never say never. I mean, as Harry does say in that interview, the focus is on my dad. I don't quite know what the inference of that is. I mean, clearly he still hankers for a reconciliation. He does say that that he's likely to spend more time in Britain as a result of last week, although he's still maintaining the idea that Britain's a very dangerous place.
Family, I need you to sit with this one, because what just happened on Good Morning Britain isn't really about Harry. It's about every single person who's ever tried to make you believe silence equals dignity and honesty equals betrayal. A commentator went on national television and spent nearly 6 minutes building a case against Prince Harry for the crime of staying consistent, for not backing down, for refusing to pretend a book he wrote 3 years ago suddenly stopped being true. And by the end of that segment, they'd accidentally handed us the clearest example yet of exactly how royal reporting works. Who gets protected, who gets picked apart, and who gets 9 minutes of moral interrogation, while a man tied to one of the most serious scandals in royal history gets a shrug and a "we'll see." Let's be fair first, because we always steelman the other side before we dismantle it. The argument on air went roughly like this. After the reported private reunion at Highgrove, there was supposedly real momentum toward healing in the family. Then, just days later, Harry gave an interview standing behind everything he wrote in Spare. And according to this commentator, that wasn't Harry defending his own documented life. That was Harry sabotaging progress. The claim was that Spare wasn't correcting the record. It was exposing new private information the family never consented to, and that the damage wasn't in what was true, it was simply that it was said out loud at all. Even Harry's own language, truth, accountability, got waved away as therapy talk that didn't land. It's a tidy argument. It's also missing the one thing that makes the whole story make sense. Here's what never gets mentioned when hosts build this case against Harry: why the book existed in the first place. Years, plural, family, years of one-sided, anonymous briefings. Years of Harry and Meghan being expected to stay quiet while unnamed palace sources shaped headline after headline in their absence. When you've spent over a decade on the receiving end of that, correcting the record with your own name attached to it isn't an attack. It's self-defense. It's the bare minimum version of standing up for yourself. Framing Spare as an isolated act of aggression, completely severed from the context that made it necessary, isn't analysis. That's advocacy wearing a blazer and pretending to be neutral. And here's the second layer: squaddies. The idea that Harry doubling down is somehow scandalous. Since when did consistency become a character flaw? Imagine any other public figure getting dragged for refusing to disown a true account of their own life because it made powerful relatives uncomfortable. We wouldn't call that instability. We'd call that integrity. But because it's Harry, the press reaches for a different word every time: betrayal. And of course, we can't get through a Harry segment without someone dragging up the 2021 Oprah interview and the old "recollections may vary" line, framed like it's some smoking gun contradiction. Family, we have been over this. Two people recalling different moments from an extended and painful stretch of their lives is not evidence of dishonesty. That's just how human memory works. It's not a courtroom transcript. But watch the double standard in real time. Anonymous palace sourcing gets treated like scripture, no matter how many times it's quietly walked back later, while Harry and Meghan's on-record named, attributed statements get dissected syllable by syllable. That imbalance isn't a side note. That imbalance is the entire story of how this family gets covered. Then there's the suggestion that this one interview closes the door on any relationship with William for good. Let's actually look at what happened here. Harry didn't say anything new. He gave one interview, reaffirmed something he's said publicly for 2 years already, and went right back to his charity work. That's it. But somehow this single moment, not the years of alleged briefings, not the ongoing security dispute, not the sourced hit pieces, gets treated as the obstacle to reconciliation. That framing conveniently puts the entire burden on Harry's shoulders and lets everyone else off the hook completely. And here, family is the part that should really get you talking. That same broadcast pivoted from 9 minutes grilling Harry over a 3-year-old memoir straight into Prince Andrew and the Epstein emails, treated almost like an afterthought. A quick "we'll see what happens" before moving on to weather and traffic. Sit with that contrast. A man connected to one of the most serious scandals in modern royal history gets a shrug. Harry, who has never been accused of anything remotely comparable, gets extended moral cross-examination for defending his own book. If that gap doesn't tell you everything about how this family's stories get covered, nothing will. The real headline was never "Harry doubles down." The real headline is "A man who reportedly just got real, unguarded time with his father chose, days later, not to abandon his own truth to make the press comfortable." That's not instability. That's someone who learned the hard way that silence never protected him before. And it isn't going to start now. Let's talk about Highgrove properly, because I think the real story is buried under all this noise about one interview. What's significant isn't just that the meeting happened, it's that it reportedly happened independent of William. Not brokered by him, not alongside him. Charles, as both head of the family and a man managing his own health, appears to be making a decision that this rift isn't one he's willing to leave unresolved indefinitely. For years, we've been told, mostly through anonymous sourcing, that reconciliation with Harry basically requires William's sign-off first, that William's comfort functions as a veto over the whole family's ability to move forward. Highgrove suggests otherwise. It suggests Charles is willing to build his own relationship with his son and grandchildren on his own timeline, regardless of where things stand between the brothers. That exposes something the tabloids rarely say plainly. William's silence has been functioning as policy. Every time a reporter asks about reconciliation, the answer defaults to some version of "William isn't ready," as if one grown man's personal readiness should determine whether a grandfather gets to see his grandchildren. Charles, it seems, has decided he's done waiting on that particular timetable. Now, fair's fair. The case for William's caution isn't completely unreasonable on paper. He's the future king. He has to weigh institutional stability, how a public reconciliation reads, protecting his own household. There's a real argument that rushing back toward closeness with Harry so soon after Spare and after Oprah could look like weakness, or reopen wounds that are still raw for Kate and the children. There's also the argument that trust has to be earned through consistency, not a single warm interview. That if Harry says something conciliatory one week and defends Spare firmly the next, that could read as mixed signals. That's the strongest version of that case. Now, let's take it apart. First, needing time and holding a veto are two completely different things. Charles didn't need William's permission to be a grandfather, and he shouldn't need it. The fact that so much royal commentary treats William's comfort as the deciding factor in who gets access to Charles says a lot more about how this story has been structured than about what's actually healthy in a family. Second, the idea that wanting a relationship with Charles and standing by an honest account of the past are somehow in conflict is just false. They're not contradictory. That's what a mature relationship actually looks like. You don't have to erase the past to move forward from it. Forcing Harry to renounce his own book as the entry fee for a relationship with his father isn't accountability. That's the actual dysfunction here. Third, notice how fast the coverage pivots from beautiful, meaningful private reunion to, but is Harry's book comment going to ruin everything? That whiplash isn't an accident, squaddies. We've tracked this pattern on this channel for months. Any positive Harry story gets about a week shelf life before a fresh angle shows up to cast doubt on it. Ask yourself who benefits from that cycle. Not Harry, not Charles, not the family. Just outlets that need conflict to keep the clicks coming. Here's the quiet part, loudly. Charles is dealing with his own health situation, and time is not unlimited. Every royal commentator loves speculating about succession in the abstract. William's preparation, the slimmed-down monarchy model. But almost nobody wants to say plainly that a father thinking about his own mortality has every reason to prioritize time with all of his grandchildren, not just the ones who live nearby. If Highgrove tells us anything, it's that Charles may be quietly rejecting the idea that reconciliation has to wait for some right time that conveniently never actually arrives. That's not a scandal. That's a parent making a choice on his own terms in the time he has left to make it. And if the institutional gatekeepers around this family are uncomfortable with that discomfort is not Harry's job to manage. We can't talk about Harry and the UK without talking about security, because this is where the asymmetry in coverage becomes impossible to ignore. Harry lost his Court of Appeal case. The review got reopened. Renewed protection was rejected again ahead of a planned visit. Every single one of those developments got covered like Harry was demanding some unearned, unprecedented privilege. But strip the framing away and look at the substance. This is a former working royal, a decorated veteran, a documented target of threats whose own family history includes losing his mother in part because of inadequate protection from press intrusion. Asking for a security assessment that reflects real current risk isn't entitlement. It's due diligence. And yet the coverage keeps asking whether Harry is being reasonable, instead of asking why the risk assessment process has been so resistant to basic transparency. Former counter-terrorism figures have said this deserves genuine scrutiny. But how often does that framing actually make the front page compared to the endless "Harry demands more security" headlines? That's the through-line family. Spare, Oprah, RAVEC. Same pattern every time. Harry's stated reasons get treated with suspicion. The institution's unstated reasons get treated as self-evidently legitimate. That's not balanced journalism. That's a thumb on the scale. So where does this leave things? Charles appears to be building a relationship with Harry's family on his own terms, independent of William's comfort level. William continues to say nothing publicly, which increasingly reads less like caution and more like an unwillingness to be the one who moves first. And the RAVEC fight keeps shaping whether Harry, Meghan and their kids can spend meaningful time in the UK at all, which undercuts a huge amount of the "why doesn't Harry just come home more" commentary we hear constantly. He wants to. The obstacles aren't coming from him. None of this resolves in a single news cycle. But the direction of travel matters. A grandfather choosing his grandchildren. A son refusing to trade his truth for peace. A brother who still hasn't said a word. That's the real story sitting underneath all the noise about one interview. Now, I want to hear from you, family. Do you think Charles reaching out independent of William is a real shift? Or just another moment that gets walked back the second the tabloids need a new angle? And how long do you think William's silence can actually hold before it becomes its own headline? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one. If this hit home, smash that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and send this to someone who's been following the Sussex story as closely as we have. The receipts don't lie, even when the headlines do. Until next time, family, thank you for being here.